Welcome to Reason for Truth. I'm your host, Stephen Garofalo. Today I want to talk about what would God say to Mad Max. Remember that movie, the old Mad Max? Oh my gosh, if you haven't, go ahead and YouTube it. You know, what would the United States look like without law and order is the point. Law and order are the things the Bible deems the responsibility of the government. Really, it's responsible of all people, but enforcing the law is the law of the government, local, state, federal, right? But what happens when the government fails to enforce the law? What happens when lawmakers change the law to meet the needs of their own political gain? Listen, God created the earth, the heavens and the earth, really with law and order, really a sense of order. When sin entered the world, sinful human beings, right? Evil went ahead and it took God's order into disorder, started with Adam and Eve in the garden. Today, I want to just take a peek. This is real casual through Romans 13, part of it anyways, to kind of better clarify what God says about the citizens' responsibility to respect and follow the law, and the responsibility of lawmakers, meaning government officials, their responsibility to enforce, not manipulate the law. If you haven't seen the movie Mad Max, go to YouTube, at least plug in a little bit of it. You feel like, oh man, it's kind of a crazy movie. It's a movie about a man named Max. See, Mad Max they call him. He's a man of action and a man of few words. And he seeks peace and he seeks justice after his wife and his child are killed after the breakdown of society, which turns into societal chaos. The movie takes place in the stark desert wastelands, populated by broken humanity, driven to survival and unending ravaging for gasoline, which I think is in the movie is one of the most valued things because there's not a lot of it. But it's used constantly. They're fighting through and with vehicles. Max, he's a former policeman. He was captured by the War Boys tribe in the movie, but manages to escape from the car. And it's a brutal movie about survival by any means. And in the movie, years after the collapse of civilization, a tyrannical, immoral Joe, it's a bad character in the movie, enslaves this apocalypse survivors inside the desert fortress called the Citadel. The movie Mad Max really tells us to stand strong for law and justice in the name of good, not in the name of evil, but during trials of evil. Right? This is a summary and a write-up, by the way. You can check it out at m.imdb.com. And it's titled something like on the movie Mad Max, Fury Road 2015. The Bible tells the same story, minus the Hollywood flair, about law and order, hold society together, and it does. When we find a violation of the law and order, we find sin, we find evil, and that leads to chaos. What would the United States look like without law and order? I don't think anybody wants that. That's why this political season, I am really baffled as to why people would ignore that and just vote on emotion. But today we're going to go through Romans 13 briefly in order to contrast chaos, Mad Max style, with law and order, God style, as found in the Bible in Romans chapter 15. I'm amazed by, again, the naivety of some Christians. And I'm sorry if I'm stepping on your toes, but listen, we all got to follow the Bible, not what I say, not what you say, how we feel about it. But the naivety of some Christians who vote according to their emotions, how they feel about a candidate, or the fact that they may like or dislike a candidate. Listen, a vote or a lack there in support for a politician who supports death of babies through abortion, violent vigilantism in the streets, the burning of cities, businesses, people's homes, killing them, and corruption and unethical election practices just amazes me, makes me kind of conclude that perhaps their salvation is not what they think it is. And at the end of the day, I think that gives us reasons to suspect that such a person's salvation, again, is in question. But from the beginning of time, wisdom starts with the fear of God. It's a healthy fear. When one fails to fear the ultimate law, that's God reflecting God's justice, it clearly is a failure to fear the ultimate law, which means the ultimate lawmaker himself. Ultimate law mandates an ultimate lawmaker. That's God, right? Listen, welcome to the Reason for Truth, where the truth comes first, reasons come last, but where we're always and constantly learning, because when we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well. To welcome today's truth is that God calls both citizens and government to obey God's ultimate law and regarding truth and justice. When the government fails to create and or enforce the law rightly, and enforce justice. Chaos ensues and citizens rebel. And the good news is that God has provided us a better way. That's the great news. And we're going to look at, again, Romans 13 in the ESV. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. That's verse 1. I want to pick up there because really at the end of the day, I want to make clear that, listen, if you're the government, your responsibility, your authority is not be given to you by you or any other human being, but by God. Just as if we're people or citizens that we're called to follow the authority of the government. In the United States of America, we have a right to vote in our politicians. It can be tricky at times, but we have to make sure that if everybody follows the food chain up to God down to the citizens, that's where society runs well. That is what made America so great all these years, is because of that reason. Was America perfect? No, but it certainly is the greatest country ever to exist. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. Now, some people say, a lot of times I think we see this as the people who, for the Christians, hey, listen, you didn't do what you're supposed to do to the T. And then we say people burning down cities, and they say, look at you. See that all the time. At the end of the day, people burning down the cities, you're really breaking the law. Just because you don't like the law doesn't mean that that's the way that you solve things. By the same token, we as Christians need to be careful how we respond to other people, right? I mean, gosh, we don't want to get on social media and throw up emotionally all over everybody or get into tussles. We have to go ahead and set good examples. Love people where they're at. And then let's create peace that way. Listen, verse 3 says, for rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. Now, I'll say this. Isaiah as well said, listen, woe to you who call evil good and good evil. When we say good is evil and evil is good, then you're really mixing things up, and people have to be discerning. Go to the Bible, see what is good and see what is evil. God will tell you through his word and through praying in the power of the Holy Spirit. He will make it clear. But at the end of the day, if the authorities act evil, you're going to be held into accountability. If we as citizens act in evil in response, we're going to be held accountable, okay? Notice how I'm fair and balanced over here, right? And then it goes on in verse 4, it says, for he is God's servant for the good. That's the government. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. That's the government, speaking of the government. For he is a servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. Well, interesting. So we're trying to change laws to say you can't think a certain way. That's probably pretty much the most vile violation of the law on either side, right? You never force someone to think a certain way. That's why we have freedom of speech in the United States of America, right? Verse 6 says, for because of this you also pay taxes. For the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. We may not like paying taxes. I don't like paying the amount I do, but I pay them because God calls me to, first and foremost. And verse 7 says, pay to all what is owed to them. Taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. Then it says this, love fulfills the law, fulfilling the law through love. Wow, okay? That's where we're going next. And it's true. We love other people where they're at, even if they're angry at times. I think we're going to see we owe them God's love, right? Doesn't mean we're doormats, but at the end of the day, let's pay respect to the boss. Even if we don't always respect them fully, let's just respect them because of their position, okay? Let's make sure also if you're in a position of leadership, whether it's government or corporate or even in father and mother in a family, make sure that you use love judiciously and that you don't make sure we abuse that, okay? Verse 8 says, owe no one anything except for to love each other. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. I think we can never love each other enough, right? I'm not saying be all squishy and squirmy, but love is just tough, man, right? It says, hey, I care about you. At the end of the day, you could do what you want to do. You're free to abuse the law as a lawmaker, or you're free as a citizen to break the law and be accountable to God. And if you get caught, by the law. But let's owe one thing, right? Let's make sure we pay our bills, pay our taxes. But let's make sure the one thing that we do owe is love, because love is unending, right? There's no limit on it. That's what it's saying there, verse 8. Verse 9 says, for the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, right? And any other commandment, all these are summed up in the word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Listen, love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. That's what I want to speak to you about here and briefly. I hope that's made sense to you, because at the end of the day, fulfilling of the law means obeying the authorities. But also for the authorities, it means obeying God and treating the authorities rightfully and doing the right thing. There's going to be people that may listen to this or hear it and say, I don't care by any means possible. I understand. I understand completely where you're coming from. In eternity, that's going to be held into accountability. You may get away with something now, and usually God speaks here on earth, and I think God is going to speak and bring the United States and other countries really to a point to where they have to deal with the truth and the rightfulness, and we'll see that, whether that's now or 1,000 years, or maybe that's when Jesus comes back in his return. I don't know. But that leads us to verse 11, which speaks to really the day is near. And that's what I want to talk to you about in ending here, leave on a positive note. I like it. The day is near. What does that mean? Well, verse 11 says, besides this, you know the time, that the hour has come for you to wake from sleep, for salvation is nearer to us than when we first believed. Yeah, that's right, because we're getting older, right? The night is not far gone. The day is at hand. Let us cast off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us walk properly as in the daytime, not in orgies and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and sensuality, not in quarreling and jealousy. It's pretty strong words. But put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. Now, I say this because I think a lot of people really think, listen, I'm a decent person. I'm a Christian. I go to church every day, but I view porn or whatever the case might be, or, at the end of the day, or I'm stealing from my employer, but that's just because he makes a lot of money, or I don't want to pay my taxes in this area because, listen, at the end of the day, they charge me too much. All that is wrongful thinking. If you're on the government side, you may say, well, listen, we just want to get things done our way, so we're going to go ahead and bypass the law or change the law to go ahead and suit my needs so I can stay in power. Huge responsibility there. And by the way, responsibility comes on different levels. If you steal a piece of chewing gum, it doesn't carry the same weightiness ethically and morally as if you steal the space shuttle, right? I'm being funny, but you know what I'm saying. That's an ethical question. Listen, I hope you take this, read this Romans chapter 13 for yourself, ingest it. Remember, if we fail to use the Bible in the United States and around the world as the true God of the universe, as the standard for goodness and law and order and justice, you know what's going to happen? We're going to live like Mad Max, not literally, but that's what you see on TV with the buildings burning down, people looting, killing other people. The lack of law and order is not something anybody wants. Hope you'll pray about that. Hope you'll seek that. Romans 13, marinate on it, as my friend Derwin Gray says. Make sure as well that you look at other scriptures. And remember, Mad Max lived in a horrible world. The Apostle Paul seems that we're going to be acquitted, but the only reason we can see for this momentary confidence in God is that we believe that we need the Lord. Can't do it on our own. Paul says, let your manner of life be worthy. He's given a political term meaning live as citizens of heaven. Chapter 3, verse 20. To do this, believers should stand strong. Listen, strive and accept suffering in this life that we're gonna, okay? Just accept it. It's coming. It's here already. We're already suffering. It's part of living in the present for Christ, right? And in Christ. By the same token, we just need to elect good officials to do the right thing. And if you're an official, stop, pause, think that your actions hold a lot of weight and a lot of responsibility. You're going to have to answer to the way you've acted, just as I am and everyone else as citizens do. I'm not a government person. My father worked for the Department of the Navy. He wasn't a perfect man, but I tell you, back in his day, which is decades ago, they were men and women of honor. And that's something that has stuck with me my whole life. There's no end-centered ethic there. Hope you'll take that to heart. Listen, as always, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. I promise I'll get back to you, certainly within a reasonable amount of time. If you're listening on podcast, make sure you give us 5 stars on iTunes. And if you haven't checked out our blog, go there. Listen, Del Potter's adding an article a week that's not put in the podcast or YouTube, so I think you'll enjoy that. Listen, if you're listening on YouTube lastly, I want you to do a couple things. Make sure you tell your friends about us and subscribe and then hit that little alert bell. 2 things. Number 1, make sure you subscribe. Number 2, hit that little alert bell. Ding, ding, boom, Sicilian hook. You're not going to miss any of the episodes. Lastly, it's the end of the year. We'd appreciate if you really would prayerfully consider standing with us. We do quite a bit more than just the videos. We are working 7 days a week. Try not to work Sunday. Sometimes we have to respond. It's part of running a ministry, but we just try to keep that day to be God's day of rest. But if you would go to reasonfortruth.org, reasonfortruth.bible, check out our website, all the things we're doing, as well as consider the donate button, top right, and standing with us. We appreciate that. We can't do what we do. We're not for profit. Your gifts are tax deductible. You'll receive a letter on that. And we appreciate that consideration. God's blessings to you. Appreciate you tuning in today. Until next time, I'm your host, Stephen Garofalo, and this is your Reason for Truth for today.